36. Page 36. At the top of the page, third name down, next, left of Afro-Netizen. Please add a line over the second A and make it a B. That's my last name, Chris Rabb. There is, I say this for two reasons, one less vain than the other. First reason, there's already another Chris Rabb, far more well-known than I, who is the star of a show called Jackass or Viva La Bam, one of those god-awful shows on TV. And every weekend I get a phone call from some prepubescent boy in middle America asking me if I'm Chris Rabb. So that is not me. Second reason is I'm a genealogist, and I am addicted to information on family. And genealogy is researching one's roots. And Ruby mentioned this before, talking about social networks. The social networks for most people, the vast majority of people, begin with one's family, biological or otherwise defined. That is your initial community. And when we talk about the social web, inherent in that is how many of us choose to define one type of community we belong to. And many of us belong to communities that we don't even know we belong to or know or define as communities. And one of the reasons I embrace progressivism as I see it is that we value the ability to self-define, to have a self-identity, not one that is imposed on others. And there's power in that. And that power comes from language. Language is indeed power. And language is one form of communication, and there are many. And what I liked about what Craig said is all the bloggers that have preceded what we know as electronic media, the internet in particular. And I descend from a blogger by the name of John H. Murphy, Sr., who founded the Afro-American Newspaper Company of Baltimore. And I was privileged to be the first fifth-generation descendant to be on the board of my family's paper for 11 years. It's very rare for an American business to go past 2 generations. It's that much more amazing that an African-American family can hold on to a business for 5. It is a business and an industry that is dying. And one of the things I advocated for strongly in my tenure at the Afro, which is afro.com, it was up in 1994, this website, and was reaching out to people using different media and spreading that content out, spreading out those stories to people who weren't in Baltimore, who weren't in Washington, D.C., where we have an edition, who weren't connected to these stories. And it was tough because you're talking about 116 years of culture. Things don't change overnight. But I say this to say that when I mentioned that my family owns this paper, it's really not out of braggadocio or pride as much as it is. There was no transfer of wealth in my family. So I get to say that, and it's a pretty cool thing to say. But there ain't no money. And I'm not saying that that's that's the only way to define success or how you can build a community of readers, subscribers, activists, whatever. But capacity, it has less capacity now than it did during Jim Crow. Jim Crow, 50 years ago or so, it was a lynchable offense to be caught with my family's paper if you were black. And they would pass it. You talk about viral, going viral, black folk would pass the afro down through the railways, porters. It would go from north to south, east to west. It was a dangerous thing to have at certain places at certain times. Those types of stories emboldened me to get involved in media activism, specifically around blogging, and the way in which I got involved in these social networks, starting with self-organizing journalists, activists, pundits, whatever, regular folk, was when I was asked to blog at the Democratic Convention in 2004. And I always mention that because this is a really important story, because in genealogy, there are a lot of people who want to cherry pick. They're like, how far can you go back? Oh, thank you. All right, so I have 17 seconds left. So back in the 15th century, okay. Well, my important point is, I wouldn't be here today. One is because I descend from people who chose to survive. That's always first and foremost in my mind, in my heart. Secondly, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have a significant amount of social capital, which in the new media sphere, Web 2.0, whatever we want to use, is what I call digital capital. If you look at a lot of times how we choose to craft our bios, we mentioned the New York Times, C-SPAN, NPR, because those things, for better or for worse, validate who we are or what we do, and it opens up doors for us. Now, we have a choice to make. Will we open up those doors so that we can personally benefit, or do we open up those doors and bring people in with us? These are forms of social capital that we have to be explicit about. I can't say that Afro-Netizen was the first black-oriented political website that was at the DNC, the only one, because I worked really hard and I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, or I was the smartest, the hardest working, because those things are not true. They are not true. I'm a nice guy, but those things are not necessarily. I know a lot of people work a lot harder than I do. We don't get the credit. We don't have the social capital I do. The reason I got to be a blogger, a credentialed blogger, was because I knew someone in the Democratic Party. And the reason I knew that person in the Democratic Party was because I worked on Capitol Hill. And the reason I worked on Capitol Hill was because my mommy asked Senator-elect Carol Mosley Braun to give her baby a job. That's the facts. That's the facts. Now, she could do that with great confidence because she knew I was a highly competent 23-year-old. And the senator agreed because it was a low-paying, entry-level job, but there were 10,000 people who wanted that job, who were a lot more experienced and intelligent than I. But I got that job because of social capital. And I acknowledge it and I embrace it only because I tried to open the doors for other people to come through. And I can't sit here and say that if you have the technology, because it's free, go to Wikipedia, go to this, and all those things are good, but the reality is some networks are more validated because who starts those networks, who advocates for those networks, how the networks are advocated. It's really important to know that the Afrosphere, or a lot of black bloggers who are colleagues of mine, we were not on the radar until we raised hell around Jena 6 and raised hell around Congressional Black Caucus, getting in bed with Fox News, or certainly trying, and then they had to listen to us. They had to recognize us. And I say this again to say that, you know, we all have access to these tools. All of us who have the benefit of internet access, all those folks mildly or severely computer savvy, right? But within these contexts, there are people who have closer proximity to power and privilege because of race, class, gender, sexuality, speech, nationality, all of those things. And for those of you in the audience, and I know we're in a pseudo-nonpartisan environment, for those of you who define yourselves as progressives, it's imperative for us to acknowledge our sites of privilege, okay? Because if you really believe that the only reason that you are here is because you're super smart, you got to think again. That's more like Pat Buchanan than it is Noam Chomsky. All right.